I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is an open meeting of the Seward, Nebraska governing body. The city of Seward abides by the Nebraska Open Meetings Act in conducting business. A copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is displayed on the north wall of this meeting room facility as required. Disclosure of meeting recording processes is also posted in the meeting room. A participant sign-in sheet is available for use by any citizen addressing the council. Presenters shall approach the podium, state their name and address for the clerk's record, and are asked to limit remarks to 5 minutes. All remarks shall be directed to the mayor, who shall determine by whom any appropriate response shall be made. The city of Seward reserves the right to adjust the order of items on this agenda if necessary and may elect to take action on any of the items listed. Please call the roll.
Beck.
Here.
Colterman.
Present.
Streisand.
Here.
Camperth. Here. Singleton.
Here.
Hendricks.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Wilkin.
Here.
All right, first item this evening is the draft minutes of March 15th, 2022.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
Voting in favor: Wilkin, Beck, Camperth, Colterman, Miller, Singleton, Streisand, Hendricks. 8-0.
Next, we have the consent agenda for this evening.
Move approved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
Voting in favor: Wilkin, Beck, Camperth, Colterman, Miller, Singleton, Streisand, Hendricks. 8-0.
All right, our first administrative item this evening is the presentation of the East Seward Street concrete project plans and specs. City Engineer Mike Onaby, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. So we do have in our packet, I only printed out 2 sheets, front and the back side of a 65-page plan set. There's also a 315-page set of specifications for the project that's been on our 1 and 6 for a number of years. We are completing design. We are actually ready to get approval to submit this for public bid. So we have a bid date it's May 17th that's established. The project has 240 calendar days of work. We have a substantial completion date set July 1st of 2023. We expect that this particular bidding time, the work will extend into calendar 2023. We hope, of course, to get the balance of the paving done this year. It is divided into 3 phases. So if you see the map up on the screen, the east-west portion would be a single phase, and on the right-hand side, the north-south portion would be the second phase. And then across Evergreen, we have attached a small amount of storm sewer work to the project. So it'd be very inefficient and costly to do that alone, and that would be a third phase. The project also has some sanitary sewer extension, as well as some water main extensions setting up for our future growth to the east. The project does have a little bit of sidewalk at some of the intersections, mostly along the east-west portion. At the intersection, we do have on the south side of that, we have trail spur that's being installed as part of this project. So cost estimate is currently just slightly over $1.92 million. Everybody is experiencing very high bid costs, and so the engineer's estimates are often the lowest bidder, so to speak. Our engineer, Jake Vasha, who's the project manager on this project, reported his last bid was actually under the engineer's estimate, so there's a little bit of promise. There is a lot of paving contractors that are full up of work this year, but the paver for the Waverly Road project, Gehring, reports still some availability in their schedule for calendar 2022. So with that, I'd like to seek approval on the project.
Any questions or comments from the council?
I guess my only question is about material.
Yes.
Have they, the people you talked to expressed any concerns about obtaining material? Like, I know there's been a lot of,
There has been, and a lot of it will probably be in the piping. And so the trunk sewer, the sanitary sewer, 24-inch, we bid actually vitrified clay pipe. Hopefully it's typically a higher cost of pipe, less high at these larger diameters. So it's a trunk sewer for extending all the way eventually out to Vancic Highway, with an alternate of Hobos. It's a manufactured polymer pipe, and we used for the outfall project the Hobos pipe, and it came at a substantial discount. And so with those two, avoiding polyvinyl chloride, we hope to avoid the shortages really with polyvinyl chloride, and the high cost are really with that material. So we're hoping with these material choices. Water main valves and pipe are typically in short supply, and I think we'll just have to take that as it comes, and hopefully prices have plateaued at this point in time. We don't expect them to actually go down. So the amount of water main work is about $44,000. The amount of stormwater work around $275,000. The amount of sanitary is about $300,000. So the water main and the sanitary will be out of the water and wastewater budget. So of the 1.92 million, roughly 350,000 will be in a different budget for that.
Any other questions or comments from the council?
Are we getting any support from the county on this?
We are. We're not gonna bid it until we finish the interlocal. We worked with Daryl, he's somewhere. Darius found him, and Terry at the county, and so they sat in on a number of meetings to review this. And so they still have it in their 1 and 6, correct?
Correct.
And so we'll finalize an interlocal with them and then put it out for final bid. We're just approving the plans and the specs tonight,
Okay.
so that we can say, yes, this is the project we want. And then we'll finalize an interlocal and then put it out to bid, because again, a portion of this is in the county, so obviously we want to have them finalize that before we go out and start building a road.
Any other questions or comments from the council?
Just a few other items.
Yeah, great.
This also includes some lighting upgrades, correct, Mike?
Yes, street lighting is included, yes.
And one of the biggest ones that we've heard in our discussions and talking about Highway 34 is this will also include some NDOT permitted lighting at the intersection of 34 and Seward, correct?
Correct.
I think there's 2 overhead.
There's roughly 2 overhead, roughly the size of the fixtures that are on Waverly. Everybody's seen the 30-foot masts and good lighting.
So as you come into Seward from the east on 34 now, it's treacherous to decipher where East Seward's even at for anyone that turns there. And so that will be lit up so that you can tell when you're entering the edge of town.
So the remainder will be our standard colonial style lighting. And so of course dotted out as you approach from the east heading west on 34, you'll see the line of lights on East Seward. And that should, along with the 2 at the intersection, should make it quite clear where that intersection is.
One note on this, so with the repaving we did on East Seward Street up to where we're currently at that point, especially roundabout down through that curve to where we're talking about here, there's no sidewalks there. Is that something that we're looking at that could be included on this? So that way we don't have people walking in that street anymore. They actually have sidewalk clearance to walk down to the trail, down to the dog park.
Correct.
Connecting that whole, while we're out there.
So it is, it's a little bit complicating. So the entire south side from west of Evergreen all the way through to the T intersection where it's now the bend, that'll be a 10-foot wide bike trail, right? So both the bikers and walkers and strollers and anything that wants to use that. At the intersections, the 3 intersections, Evergreen, the 2 new Goldenrod, the intersection in between Primrose, and then also the T intersection, the 4th one, will have sidewalk at the intersections. It's the city's responsibility by our ordinance to pay for the sidewalks at intersections. So we'll go ahead and extend that with curb ramps across East Seward to the north, but really be limited to that intersection portion of it. The infill will be deferred. There are a few houses. There's 2 houses on the west end, right at the bend, and next to the bend, just east of the intersection with East Seward. They are within city limits. The next 4 or 5 to the east are actually in Ridge Run, which does not have sidewalks as a whole. And then the remainder of the houses along the north side are actually in the county. And so we've elected to kind of defer. So all that has to be done is essentially from intersection to intersection, to infill with that sidewalk. We did have a discussion of a sidewalk program. And so this, how we fill that in, who pays for it, is there a cost share, is it 100% homeowner? And if it's 100% homeowner, will Ridge Run be forced to do how we handle those 4 or 5 houses? So that's how we've elected to, and of course with the intersection, everybody's able to walk to the south side at the intersection and use that 10-foot trail effectively as a sidewalk.
Yeah, because the main area that I was thinking of was on the very west side, further past Evergreen Drive when you're going towards that roundabout. There's 2 houses, I believe, on that curve.
Correct.
That we have, I believe the nurse paintings is on the west side of that road and the residentials are on the east side of that road. And like I said, you mentioned the sidewalk project that we're looking at as well. I didn't know if that'd be a good time to tackle that at the same time we're looking at this, since we're already out there, or what that might be.
I've talked to the 2 homeowners. I have mentioned that by current ordinance, 100% cost is to the homeowner. And then, of course, we have the portion from that last house around the bend across from Lidner's, all the way to the roundabout,
Right.
which would effectively be the city's responsibility. And that's a good idea, and I think to make a complete connected pedestrian circulation system, you'd wanna connect.
Right, because
Further
I know I've
roundabout.
walked out there and it
Yeah.
goes up to that roundabout, but then at that point, there's no more sidewalks, so
That's
you're
correct,
walking in the
correct.
street.
Yeah.
So that might be an area where we wanna tackle while we're already out there with everything. But other than
And then
that,
we ultimately, the other one, council member, is that we ultimately need to figure out how to interconnect that spur. And with the recent discussion that we've perpetuated for later tonight, we don't know how to interconnect that spur. We had a general idea of what we wanted to do, but there are potentially projects that will interfere with that, and we'll have to come up with different plans. So,
So we could potentially cross the road with the bike trail and go up the east side, right, and connect in
Right.
at the roundabout, as an example. It would be one way of completing that spur.
So, yeah, so other than that, I mean, everything looks good to what I can see
Of-
on here,
of
but
course.
that would be an area that might be an opportunity for us to save time in.
This project will be bid in quantities, and so we'll have a
Okay.
quantity price in terms of the sidewalk construction. And so between now and the end of the project, July of 2023, at any point in time, we agree to what the design would be, we wanna add that, we have the bid price of that quantity, that we can add that sidewalk. So it gives us a lengthy period of time to make those decisions. It's a very good idea, though. Let's do it.
Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve the project.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
Voting in favor, Wilken, Beck, Camperth, Colterman, Miller, Singleton, Streisand, Hendricks, 8-0.
Thank you, Mike. Item number 2, this is the Easter Street plan update. Greg?
yeah. What we'll do is just kind of walk you through what took place and where we went after the last 30 days or so. So pursuant to the motion that was made by the city council 2 meetings ago, we were asked to table the Prairie View development plat in hopes of taking a look at and seeing what we could do to offer options for both long-term and short-term solutions to the item that was brought up, which was kind of centered on traffic along East Seward Street, particularly between North Columbia and Lindell, and then also not having a north-south alternative that kind of bisects the city other than Highway 15 and North Columbia. So we got together and started, I have to commend City Engineer Mike Onaby. He has spent countless and countless hours working on this over the last 30 days. And so thank you, Mike, for all your work. Most of that is in a summation in 2 memos that you have put on your desk before you. You got a lot of this information in your packet, but this is kind of Michael's summation of that. We immediately went out, started developing different ideas. As soon as we had a number of those put together, we started placing those online. We also identified that we wanted to have direct communication with the residents that were impacted by this. As you know, most of the people that came to that meeting were residents of the East Seward neighborhood, as we'll call it. And we know that this impacts a lot more people than just the residents that live along that stretch of roadway. So we sent out letters to 180, Tim?
178.
178 residents that live both along East Seward Street, in that portion between North Columbia and Lindell, people that live in Plum Creek Lane, the cul-de-sac down there, Lindell, Jackson, along the county portion of East Seward as you continue out to Highway 34, residents in Valley View, and residents in Ridge Run. So we sent out letters to all of them, letting them know about the information that was available online. I think we also hit some residents up along Bluff Road when we started identifying alternatives going through potentially some of their property. And 252nd. So we sent out all of those letters, started posting things online. Those ideas and alternatives changed as this developed because we were moving very quickly over 30 days. And so once we heard from NDOT, we met with them multiple times over the last 30 days to look at different ideas, talk about speed limits, roadway access to the highway, and what alternatives we had available to us. We kept adjusting those and placing them online. Ultimately, we had a public meeting for the neighbors that were invited. Some of the council members, I believe, attended that. It was held at the Civic Center in the auditorium. We had 100+ residents come by and see a presentation put on by Mike Onaby and myself to kind of review where we were at that time, solicit some feedback, and then make sure that we handed out the feedback sheets that included both long-term and short-term alternatives. Those sheets were requested to be given back on March 30th so we could tabulate the information that we received in them for this meeting here. For the most part, we got a good number. I think we got 69 back by the deadline, and then a few more trickled in afterwards. When those came in the door, they were separated by neighborhood so that we could easily identify them. And then as you see, when we presented the data to you, we gave you total data, and then we gave you neighborhood-specific data. And then we had some of the people that kind of floated around we couldn't specifically identify as being traditionally in one of the traditional neighborhoods, which is East Seward, Ridge Run, and Valley View. And so we put all that data together. We provided it to you in the packet. In the meantime, Mike did his best to put together, based on the alternatives that we couldn't weed out for one reason or the other, cost estimates. And the most recent cost estimate numbers are also included, I believe, in your packet. They adjust as the days go by. I can tell you right now, numbers are all over the place. But Mike did his best and used a very good methodology to try and make that estimation in the packet. And so that kind of leads us to where we are. I also know that we had a number of individual meetings with staff, or a portion of the staff that was involved in this project, with landowners, neighborhoods again. And so I think I got Tom Goodbarn on speed dial now, and it's been quite a time. And in the middle of that, we also had stakeholder meetings for the Highway 15 project. So if you wanted to just complicate it a little bit more, just totally sidetrack ourselves for a few days and then come back to this. There's a lot there, and I don't think, I mean, again, we presented for the most part most of these items at the neighborhood meeting at the Civic Center. We can quickly walk through them if you would like. I know you've had these in your hands for a while. But that is essentially what we were tasked with in 30 days. We think we've come up with some of the best ideas we can at this point, given the time constraints, and presented that information to you here. And that's where we're at.
So I guess at this point, if you wanna look at that, if there are items that you would want us to pursue further, we can, like Greg said, we did the best we could in 30 days, but obviously some of these things need to be fleshed out a little bit more if you wanted us to pursue any of those options. So I don't need an answer tonight, but if you'd like to look at that and you know, make a suggestion on what you'd like us to pursue, we'd be happy to do that. It's just a lot of information right now. Sid, did you have something?
Yeah, I'm not good at bar graphs and stuff, so Mike, if you could, or Greg,
Walk us through that.
yeah, just walk us
maybe?
through especially this page here that shows the different, responses and how they were grouped. I mean, I think I see what I'm seeing as far as what people thought was the most popular, but, could you just kind of interpret it for us?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have two of them up here right now. The top one here, for all the 69 sheets that we did get and tabulate, people varied in terms of how much priority they gave us, and we took the top three. And so we considered the top three would be somebody's first, second, third choice per se, and be a priority. I color coded them here, apologize for maybe a little hard to see in the colors. It's tabulated, all of this data is in the following tables, so sometimes it's easier to flip over to the table, see the actual number, so they're afterwards. And essentially sees you can see which are the popular choices. Obviously 5 has quite a few responses positively. 10, 13, 14, 15, and 18 as well. And then you can see the choices that are much less high priority. 6, 7, and 8. 12 would be another one. 16 and 17, another 2. Of course, some of these projects, if you refer to your figure 2, these projects are just juxtaposed with the future development. So all of these we have found in previous 1-6 plans. We've found in earlier traffic studies for this region. We found in earlier comprehensive plans. I don't know if there's any original ideas. So they're really projects that make sense as that adjacent area develops. So then in the second figure here, it totals up. So for these 3, so you can see in item 10, there's as a third choice, green is 3 responses, and then a second choice in red is 11, and as a first choice in blue looks like 15. 26. So however that adds up, it adds up to the total down below, which looks like 29 as an example, under 10 in the blue. And of course then on the second figure there, figure 5, the total of priorities 1 and 2 in blue is compared to the negative or no responses that we collected. And then so through that whole range of options from 5 through 18, you can kind of see in this figure 5, you can see strong positives. So if you look like at projects 6, 7, and 8, probably deeply unpopular. And if you look over to projects 13 and 14 and 18, highly popular. And so that's essentially what the numbers, a way to evaluate in terms of what the stakeholders felt was in their best interest.
Sure. So on that top chart there, like for instance, alternative 5, could you just remind us all what that was? Like I'm looking at the chart here where it's restricting like one-way traffic and then filtering things off, right, over to Lindell.
The 5, no, that's a
the
separate
in the wrong
figure.
packet.
That's Crooked Mile.
There's 2 memos in front of you. One's a
Yeah.
short-term memo, one's a long-term.
I thought the questions here, so we could get back to, I'm sorry,
Well, then you just tell us what it is.
all right.
That's why I'm
Alternative five is going from the bend at East Seward, where, just west of Evergreen, where East Seward is, goes up to the roundabout. So just south of the roundabout, that intersection, new T intersection, out to Crooked Mile Road. You're essentially next to the implement dealer, essentially on part of the old railroad right of way.
Have you talked to Roger Littner about that and Clags?
Well, that would not affect Roger Ligner. So we didn't have time,
Langner.
yeah,
And Clag.
Mr. Langner was in himself
Yep.
a couple of times.
We,
So,
we contacted everybody that lives in this area and let them know
Multiple
what we were doing and the availability of it. So there hasn't been a shortage of opportunities over the last 30 days for anybody to come in. And anybody that's requested it, we scheduled and made specific time with them. I think I met with Mike for an hour myself.
And Clags.
Did not meet
Jack
with Mike.
Clegg has been in at least twice,
Okay.
wants to drop off his priorities, and then wants to just kind of get a feel for what's going on, so he is well aware of what that.
And the outcome of his thoughts.
He didn't specify one way or another, and I didn't look at his sheet, so I couldn't tell you what his priority was.
So having this information, one short term, one long term, are we doing anything with this data as far as saying, okay, this is where the neighborhoods kind of did to put in the plan of action to be proactive before the next agenda item that we approve a replat? Or is this just data for us to have?
We were asked 30 days to go to give you all the alternatives in 30 days, and that's what we did.
So as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, if there was anything we wanted to do associated with cost, we can't just say, do it. We have to put it through the 1 and 6
The
and the budget.
The long-term projects need to be identified in your 1 and 6 year road plan to expend funds on. That's how you identify where we take state funds and street funds and expend those on large-scale projects. So we need to, for any of the large-scale ones, I imagine, what you'll need to do is identify the projects, get more specific data in regards to estimation of cost. Mike's got a pretty good estimation of cost going here, for just laying it out in a line item. But you'll need to make a decision about which ones, I mean, you got a lot here and you can't do them all. We have projects that cost $1 million, we have one that costs $6.5 million for one of them. So we need to pick where we wanna prioritize and where we wanna go with these. The other good,
What's our next opportunity to update the 1 and 6 year plan?
You-
Anytime we want, or?
anytime you want, I would say I would recommend it while you're doing your budget like we do now. We used to do it in February all the time and we moved away from that because we only have to pass a resolution rather than turning it in like March. They changed that years ago, because they said it makes it, you're not dealing with your financial situation in March, you're dealing with it in July and August. So it makes more sense to do it in the summer. And so this summer is when you would probably identify it, place it in there under normal circumstances, and then prepare your budget. Obviously, these need extensive engineering.
Right.
And so the first thing you would do is tee it up probably for 1 year alone and set the engineering out.
And can you provide us, Mike, and maybe Greg, I don't know, I know you have done extraordinary legwork in the last month, and I think your whole team has, so all of you have, thank you. Can you provide us some of the context of the conversations with the county? Because I know you spent extensive time with them, and then also anything that might be helpful for us from Department of Transportation.
From the county perspective, Daryl just left.
He was
He
probably
must
like,
have
"I'm
known
out."
you were gonna throw him under the bus. I visited with the county board and Mike was there with me as well at their 1 and 6 year plan. And we met with them and we identified that East Seward Street, which is our #1 priority, we approved the specs tonight, that was on their 1 and 6. And then I essentially stated the situation that's taking place and the growth of Seward and the need to identify an eastern project. As I've said before, many have heard it at the public meeting that we had. We need to identify and get on the same page about 252nd, Matsky Highway, continuing to the north, Bluff Road, and Waverly. And whatever amalgamation of that we want, and a prioritization. Because it does not make sense to have the county prioritizing Matsky and Waverly while we're never gonna touch those in 50 years, but we're definitely gonna be involved with and seeing increased traffic along 252nd and Bluff. And so we just need to get on the same page. And what I've thrown out to them is I think what needs to ultimately happen through this summer, as they're also working through their comprehensive plan that includes some of this information, is that the county commissioners and the city council need together, and also the planning commissions for both, need to have joint public meetings to discuss these two specific things. And then kind of plan through that and get everybody on the same page. It was incredible, and some people heard me say this right, it was incredibly disappointing for me to pull out the 2007 to 2030 county comprehensive plan. And under their transportation element, which is pages and pages and pages, they listed their 1 and 6 year projects. And the first 4 or 5 projects listed in priority in 2007 was pave 252nd, pave Bluff Road to 252nd, pave Waverly Road to the Garland Spur, and pave Matsky Highway from Highway 34 to Waverly. Those were the top 4 projects, and they didn't do any of them.
So, is it fair to say now, having had the initial conversation with them, that they are open to this collaborative process of all of us sitting down in the same room and walking through this with community input in the near future?
Yes, they are. The hard conversations you have when you finally get together with them is, how are we going to pull this off, and what's the balance of utilizing funds between the two entities to try and, we've worked really well on East Seward Street, and I commend the county on that, but that is an immediate need that the city is kind of surrounding now versus a more long-term need. The residents that live on 252nd are not going to be excited if we can continue to run traffic along there, and the roads are hard to maintain, they're dangerous, and at some point we need to have a more permanent solution, and the county may say, all right, we need to hard surface that roadway, but we have to be on the same page. We can't be pulling for Waverly Road and they're pulling for Bluff, and vice versa. So that's what happened with the county. As it relates to NDOT, really what they wanted to talk about and let us know in regards to Highway 34 was they want to see access points that are approximately every quarter section? Half a section.
Half mile,
Quarter section.
Every quarter section. So currently, if you look at some of your maps that you have in front of you, that's 252nd. That's what we identify as Prairie Flower, but ultimately, we all know colloquially as East Seward, where it comes out to Highway 34. Evergreen is the next one, and then the one after that is actually Columbia. Those are the access points
And that's,
that they want to see.
they don't need them any more than that. They're okay with just that.
They're okay with, those are what they predominantly, they want them limited to every quarter section because Highway 34 is a controlled access highway designated to be 4 lanes at some point in the future. And they will not abandon that idea. And it's 4 lanes coming out of Lincoln now, right on the edge of Lincoln. And the plan at some point, probably after we're all dead and gone, is to have that. And I think that was Tom Goodbarn's exact quote. When we're all dead and gone, including Butcher, we'll finally see that happen. But they have to control that access in anticipation of that. They don't want to give a bunch of openings and access for public and then have to come back and close them and create the headaches we know that would cause. Due to the nature of speed and stuff, they did say because of the current intersection, for instance 5, which is the one that curves down and essentially meets up with Crooked Mile Road, we already have an intersection with that roadway there, so that would be a permissible one.
Oh, okay.
But that's not the ideal one. Again, the ideal is to have them exactly on the quarter section because of speed, traffic, and volume in the future. Controlled access highway. We discussed, for instance, 16 and any of these others that might pop out at the quarter section. And the reason they don't like those is most of those are located in areas where you have sight distance issues. If you notice now, most of them have no passing zones. If it's a no passing zone, it's probably a really bad place to put a public access roadway. Because the sightlines there are bad for you to pass somebody. Why would it be a good place to pull out in front of somebody that's going 65 or 45 and you're going 20? And so 16, even some of the other points that we looked at there, they're just not as ideal. So
Well, and we also don't know, once East Third Street's paved to Highway 34, we don't know how that's going to change people's driving habits. I mean, I know, I've just anecdotally, people who live in Ridge Run have told me that if it were paved now in a good condition, they would take that to the highway and leave Ridge Run. Now, again, anecdotally, then I'll do my own survey, but, you know, just knowing that, you know, it's kinda like when before we did anything with Waverly, we did a traffic count after the middle school was built, because you knew that the traffic patterns were going to change. So, you know, we can have the discussion about the road projects, but again, you know, that would be a discussion for the 6-year plan, but you also wanna keep in mind that just paving the rest of East Third Street might alleviate some of this.
Another question, Greg. One of the conversations we had 30 days ago was related to East Seward is designated, I believe it happened in maybe the 60s or 70s, as a collector. Is that the right word? Which means that larger trucks can go down it and so on and so forth. I think there was gonna be a conversation with the Department of Transportation on that specifically and whether or not we can undesignate it. Is that correct?
we did have that conversation in the same meeting. That was our intent, and we had begun that process prior to this and meeting just with the East Seward residents last summer. The history of that is mind-boggling. After the last 30 days, we pulled out basically any study we could find.
Or
and so-
map, right, going back
Yep,
to.
I have studies back to the 70s that identify tons of these projects, and unfortunately, we just didn't tee off on some of them in the past and maybe alleviate this headache today, but we are where we are. At one point in time, we were chasing designations, I think, for funding purposes. But we had always included, even in that 1970 study, that even the rural portion, when the end of the city ended at Lindell, the rural portion was always identified as a collector all the way out to Highway 34.
Funding was
So-
different back then, it was 80-20 split, and I think in order to qualify for that, you had to be a collector road, otherwise the state wouldn't contribute their 80% to those projects, so that was one of the reasons why. And if you remember, like, you know, and again, it's easy to second guess now that we're where we are, but I mean, I'm sure the people out in the audience remember when they were doing work on Highway 34 at one point, and they pushed all that traffic through there. It was a mess, but, you know, that should have been the time to have done East Seward Street first, and then, use that as the bypass off the highway. But, you know, you mentioned Jack Clegg earlier. I believe he had a bowl in his yard to collect the dust that had like measurements on it because of all the cars that would go by and just kick up dust everywhere. And he was quite proud of that.
And that's why we oiled it, or that, whatever you call it.
So that was basically, Mike, what you put up there was what I would call the long-term
Yes.
solutions. So then could you do the same for the short-term, which
Sure.
is the other one? Thank you.
Can I just follow up on Jessica's, what is the determination on East Seward as a collector or not?
Right now, we're kind of in waiting because we want to know what ultimately you want to do, because it does not make sense to designate East Seward as a collector and have this gap for essentially one block. So what we'll need to do is decipher if we're going to declassify that. You probably will declassify it all the way through to Highway 34. Unless you have an alternative route, or we designate one of these in the future and realign that, we have to de-designate it from North Columbia all the way down. And we want to wait and do that once we know what we're doing. But
it can be done.
it can be done. They're also not entirely, I'll just speak for Mike, they're not the most forthcoming on how you go through the process. It's really low on the NDOT priority list for some reason. So,
We simply haven't had enough runway to get there quite yet, so it's in process.
yeah.
Okay, so again, these are for the 8 alternatives we proposed for handling essentially the portion of East Seward Street from Columbia to Lindell. Some of the options obviously involve some modifications farther to the east at the roundabout, for example. Operating off of memory here, so the first 2 options, I think option 1 was closing East Seward, essentially at the Plum Creek Bridge. Option 2, just go through this list, was converting East Seward into a cul-de-sac, so we would segregate at the intersection of Lindell and East Seward at the bottom of the hill. Option 3 was to close East Seward at the roundabout. 4 was to widen, actually, East Seward to make it more conforming to the city requirements for a collector street. 5 was to convert East Seward and Lindell and part of Jackson into one-way. 6 was to restrict trucks, 7 restrict parking, and 8 effectively was to look for long-term projects. And so it was effectively to do none of these options is number 8. So as you can see here, the first 2 again, color coordinating, blue is the highest priority, red second priority, green third priority. You can kind of see with the first figure, how that distribution is, and some can, has broad support, right? Number 4 and number 8 is an example across large. It may not be the highest priority, but it might be your second and third priority. First and second options didn't look like it was favorable to anybody. Nobody voted for them. And if you look in the next graph, figure 8, right below it, I'm sorry, figure 9, with the pink line, a lot of opposition to the first 3, actually. Once we get to the option 4, pretty mixed results. We see some favorable results, 5, 6, 7 again, as many as 4 as opposed. And of course, number 8, looking to those long-term options is probably where we see the greatest differential. Far more people favorable and far fewer people in opposition.
So theoretically, if you wanted to put these memos together, you could say, generally speaking, people are in favor of a long-term solution, not
Correct,
looking
they're linked. But I would say also there's probably ways we can modify subtly traffic along East Seward Street that would probably benefit. And so that would take some discussion, probably take some compromise. But banning trucks, in terms of going along with the redefining East Seward is not a collector, a local road, right? And do we ban trucks? Actually, Thomas Matsky sent me a photo today of a tractor trailer that was at the intersection. They had actually delivered locally on Plum Creek Lane and made the delivery and made their way back up the hill. And so we do see that periodically. But of course, that truck would have to have a different route to make that local delivery. And typically, banning trucks, there's usually an exception for local deliveries as well. So, but anyway, there are a number of opportunities, I think, that we could look, not specifically at these 8, but maybe at some intermediate alternatives that we haven't enumerated
that aren't here.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
But from this poll,
Mm-hmm.
the banning trucks and basically looking at long-term were the 2 most popular
Correct.
responses.
And 6 could happen immediately or easily, I guess you want to say too.
Restricting trucks
Yeah.
is number 6.
Because parking's gonna have heartburn, no parking.
Yeah, of course, parking, and of course, if you don't live, I could go farther down. I could show you an example of what the last 2 graphs are when you talk about, number 7 as an example, no parking. So you see in figure 10 here, number 7, that in purple, the Ridge Run, would be favorable to banning parking, right? So you're just passing through East Seward, and so if there's actually no parking on East Seward, it favor your lifestyle, right? Your commute, whatever needs you have. If you go down to figure 11 here, you see in that brick red, that's East Seward residents. Well, they have narrow driveways. Their driveways and houses were built 100 years ago when we didn't have large vehicles, we didn't have multiple vehicles. And so for them, it'd be a hardship. They don't have double wide or three wide garages and double wide driveways to serve a normal modern lifestyle. So that's understandable. So that's the purpose of these other two figures, is kind of glean what you can from where people live in terms of how they have voted. So I would not advocate, as an example, strictly banning parking. Perhaps there's alternatives, right? There's a bump out there now. Our bump outs for those that would want parking is restricting parking on one side. And I don't specifically want to, it's just a couple of alternatives that we have not explicitly put down in this group of 8 that may help alleviate the situation. So I think there are many things we can do going forward.
So Greg, on this short-term options, what would you need from us to keep this moving along, either with what was decided by this survey or to explore the other issues, that possibilities that Mike suggested? Just trust that you're gonna do it, or do we need to?
No, we need direction.
Okay.
So, as I said, I think the biggest thing that we got out of it is that we identified things that people don't wanna do. And we can mark them off and be done with them and not, so we're not discussing closing East Seward anymore. Nobody wants to do that. They wanna leave it open. Even the residents that live on it want it open. So, mark that off the list. Even in the long-term ones, there's long-term solutions that didn't seem very popular. Well, let's not waste a whole lot of time talking about those and researching them and everything else that goes with them. From there, this council needs to come together and give the administration direction of where they want to go with this. And I'm going to preface this, especially on the long-term one. There is no silver bullet.
No.
You are going to make somebody upset. And we have to understand that.
Right.
Because that is the situation we're in.
But the simplest route that we could take right away is to take the trucks off.
Absolutely.
That would be simple. And if we go to number 7, and then you have to do bump outs, we don't wanna be taking any trees, because we don't wanna lose that either. And that would cause potential to lose some trees. So the best alternative right now that we could do is stop the trucks.
We can stop the trucks, we can slow traffic. I know the residents over there has talked about a speed bump, but again, we kind of put everything on hold until we knew what the plan was. If we were gonna cut down to a neighborhood street or one-way street or anything else, then it changes what our alternatives are.
So do we need this as an agenda item on like the next meeting of like a resolution that we can
For
make
the,
that
for
happen?
the short-term ones, we can
Yeah.
ban trucks
So I would,
along the route.
We would probably prefer a motion, if you wanted to do it tonight or in a future meeting, to identify the temporary or short-term solutions.
So
So then we
just-
could put something together
Right.
and bring it back to you in a resolution form, and you can decide at that point, just so that we don't get the cart ahead of the horse.
Right, right.
so
I mean,
you
that's-
would, for procedural perspective, we can just make a motion on this agenda item, like you could say, I'd make a motion to.
Basically direct administration to draft a resolution and bring it back to the council for
So,
consideration.
I mean, I'll make the motion that we go ahead with the short term, that the administration come back to the council next meeting, that we ban trucks on the East Seward route.
I'll make a second on that.
We have motion, yes.
Question.
Well, we have motion and second, is it for discussion, Ellen?
Yeah. Could we also, excuse me, could we also continue to look at this as not a collector road, to continue down that process with this road? Do we need to make that part of this suggestion?
I would probably do individual motions, just so that we don't muddy what
Okay.
the expectations
You
are.
can make that motion, yeah.
What
I-
about Ramblin' now, the
I
first
would
one?
wait until we hear back from NDOT, cause you're gonna declassify it all the way to Highway 34.
I guess I wasn't saying do it, I just guess I would continue to pursue it.
Investigate the
Tell you that.
process.
We can do that separately. You're asking for a resolution for us to
Okay.
bring
So
back
I
on the
don't-
alternatives.
You don't need a resolution.
We can keep
continue
pushing that
Yeah.
one.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know, that's fine.
Yeah, cause we need to know how to do that process and undertake it.
Gotcha, okay, but that's still on the table.
Yep.
Alright,
sometimes I wonder maybe, I've been told before by DOT that Seward has weird questions that they don't necessarily have to answer a lot, and so they don't always have a clear answer. I think one question we had one time was, can we just paint the bridge on Highway 15? And they're like, well, no one's ever asked us if they could paint the bridge, like, for them. So occasionally we'll have odd questions if someone, the First Impressions Committee wanted to know if they could just paint the bridge. So some of these questions, you know, that we approach them with, I don't think that they're being evasive or difficult, I just don't know that they get those questions a lot, or if it's something that they deal with on a regular basis. But we would continue to pursue it until we get clear direction on how to formally address it, and then bring it back to the council and even let us know at that time. So right now I have one motion, and then we'll deal with this one motion, and then we can, if you have other motions, we can do those after that, if that's amenable. So we had, the motion was to, we bring back a resolution of the council banning trucks. I assume that'd be in a signed form, but we will have a resolution that you can then discuss at the next meeting.
No.
That was your motion?
Yeah, the
Okay.
next question is, do we need to say the motion from Lindell to Columbia? Do I need to add that in there?
Well, if you, I mean,
Because I think that's the smartest. I'll amend it by adding from Lindell to Columbia.
so the sign would be on Lindell, and the sign
Right
would be
at
on
the bo- right at
Columbia.
the bridge.
At the bottom of East
Yeah.
Seward and the top
Yeah.
of East Seward.
Yeah.
And that's friendly, so I will continue
You're
with my second.
Alright,
So
So-
can I ask a question?
yeah,
then?
yeah, it's a discussion. No, you're fine.
If we do that, just pick out that one section, what happened, what's the practical effect for the rest of the road?
The practical effect we were trying to figure out is, what happens to the trucks that sneak in off of East Seward at 34 or Evergreen?
And part of it's gonna be enforcement, the other part is going to be, you assume that on Columbia they'll avoid it because they'll see the sign. If you're coming from the other direction, you cross the bridge, now you're at Lindell and it says no trucks, then you have to figure out how do you turn around, or how do you go, or do you go up, was it Jackson? On
We
the other
go
side.
with the sign further down, maybe by the dog park
This
already.
is your motion, you can do whatever
I'm
you
just
want.
saying, I'm just saying that I'm thinking that through, that
I
you
kinda,
have
I
a
kinda
sign.
like that, down to the dog park,
At
Yeah.
the roundabout?
Yeah.
gives
Or-
them a place to round
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, right at the end of that roundabout, so I think you're right. Oh,
They
that'd be
run
tough.
over.
That's tough.
A lot of this stuff gets wily down there. The other one I have to, I mean, we shouldn't be making this in a vacuum. You have some apartments and potentially a business back there, and I don't know where Tim went. Tim, are you still there?
John.
That has identified that they may be receiving deliveries
And as well as this.
through
That's
trucks.
what has been
Curve.
indicated.
And so we also wanna follow up and get very
Because that's
specific.
the only how they would be getting into that artillery, is if you put out those two entrances there,
Would they
they
be
then
affected
know
by
that you
extending
have one
our,
at the top of
no trucks?
East Seward Street.
What?
and
Yeah.
down,
Would that business be
and then you have the
affected by?
two at the main
Potential,
office.
yes,
Oh,
the only access into that business that's back there is
Gotcha.
on
Yeah, we
East
shouldn't do
Seward.
that then, I suppose.
No, you, East
So
Seward
we need
Street
to-
off
Excuse me.
34,
Mhm.
you would have that intersection there.
We can only have
no
one
truck
conversation
traffic,
at a time,
And then you would also
guys.
have the intersection at Evergreen,